Welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about the election of Emmanuel Macron as the new president of France. Let's get back to our panel. Let's go to Josh. Josh, Macron is pro-business. He says he will cut taxes, make it easier for employers to hire and fire workers. And he's also said that he would cut public expenditure. Do you think these kinds of policies have widespread support in France?
Well, I think it's certainly there's an opportunity for them too. I think one thing that he could do that would be really interesting, he's talked about bringing people from outside of politics into his government. Maybe he could put some sort of business leaders in significant positions, kind of shake things up in French politics a little bit there. On the other hand, of course, historically, many French leaders have struggled to tackle the country's labour market. They have struggled to liberalise something which does involve taking away rights from certain workers. That can be a challenge. And of course, there's the fact that among the least economically secure people in France, Marine Le Pen did win big. So if this goes wrong, if he ends up creating problems for workers, if he ends up making their jobs less secure, he does end up potentially fueling support for the far right. So I would say he could win big support for these policies, but it's quite high stakes.
Remi, what do you think? How fine a line is the president going to have to walk when it comes to dealing with French workers?
Well, it's going to be very interesting, but absolutely there's an historical opportunity right now to see if you can actually deeply reform the French labor market. We've seen over the last decades a sterile opposition between left wing and right wing, and there are some issues in France, some privileges, especially on terms of special regimes for taxi drivers, for miners, from train drivers that actually have specific privilege in terms of their retirement pensions, in terms of their working conditions that are unfair compared to the rest of the population. And he definitely said that he would actually try to tackle these. And he has maybe the possibility to do this with some kind of a bipartisan from key people in different parties. Now, the key issue is how he's going to be able to create this kind of momentum and coalition behind him. We just know that he has the support of a minority centrist party next to his En Marche movement, but it definitely is going to try to pull some kind of more collective-minded center-right and center-left people to try to get support from both aisles of a potential parliament. Now, definitely Macron is maybe the person that is able to do this because he has this momentum behind him, and he is trying to portray this image of a future of France that do not have those privileges.
So, Philip, the parliamentary elections next month then become critical.
Right. So on June 11th and June 18th, the French will go back to the polls and will have to vote for 577 members of parliament. And from that election will come out, I would say, a real government with a clear popular mandate. And that is the government that will carry on the Macron proposals. I mean, the government that will be appointed this week will just be for a few weeks. And it might give signs that it's a pro-reform government, maybe with some right-wing elements, some left-wing elements, a fairly new sort of grand coalition-style government. But the real challenge is winning the June parliamentary elections, because without a majority in parliament, he will have to compromise constantly and find majorities in parliament. It's not impossible, and honestly, it's much better than having a Marine Le Pen as president, because she would be completely isolated. He'll be able, with his prime minister, whoever he picks, or he or she, to find a kind of new majority for every single project. But I would say, with his new movement, with cooperation with other parties, center-right, center-left, he might be able to build a kind of German-style coalition that the French are not used to. I mean, it's a very divided country between left and right. Another party we didn't mention is the far left. There's a guy called Mélenchon who came fourth.
And he was doing pretty well on the polls at one stage.
He was doing pretty well, and he said that he's going to be a prime opponent to Emmanuel Macron, and he's going to be the one standing with the unions and saying, we don't want France to be part of the globalized world, we don't like free trade, this kind of thing. So he's going to give him a hard time. But, with the support Macron had, with 66% of the vote,
interesting,
he's
because
able to,
he's going to need the support of parties at both extremes.
No, I don't think so. I think he'll have enough support with the center left and center right. I don't think the far left will ever support him.
Okay. Leela, let's look at some of the issues that came up during the election campaign. Immigration and security, also hot-button issues. Macron said that he wants to hire more border guards, something that we've heard here in the United States as well. 5,000 more, he said. He wants to hire more police, 10,000 more officers, and he wants to increase prison capacity by 15,000. What does that tell us about how he's going to attack or resolve these issues that face France?
Well, you know, to be honest, Macron's positions on security have not been as well underlined as his economic positions. You know, he has repeatedly said time and again that security is a threat, but he does not view it through the prism of how Le Pen views it, you know, and the solutions are definitely not closed borders. But the real issue of this campaign was the European Union. And Macron really stuck it out by being pro-EU. And on the national front, what's interesting is that after Le Pen's poor showing in the polls, there are elements within her party who are questioning whether the party did the right thing by going anti-EU. So I think what these results are showing us is that the French definitely want reforms within the EU, but they're not really a Eurosceptic lot. And I think a lot of the analysts, and especially the international media, got very swayed by the Brexit vote and you know, looked at France through the prism of Frexit. While as these results have showed that Macron very definitely wants to work within the EU.
Josh, sorry, go ahead.
If I may just add,
yeah.
I mean, after the Brexit referendum in the UK, there were several polls that showed that 67%, I remember this figure very clearly, 67% of the French were against leaving the EU and leaving the Eurozone. I mean, people thought of leaving the euro as a financial catastrophe for themselves. I mean, going back to the old currency. I mean, the UK is in a very different situation, obviously. I mean, it's not part of the Eurozone.
Right.
And the UK has always been sort of in and out of the EU. But France is at the heart of the EU. And you know, people are not stupid. They see that there are so many interactions with the rest of Europe. So it was very clear. And I think I agree that Le Pen did a mistake by being so anti-European. That didn't match people's expectations.
Right. Josh, outside of Europe, what do we know about Macron's international experience?
Well, we know that it's fairly limited. One thing that we do know after the campaign is that whatever he thought about this before, he's now a pretty hardline Russia hawk. His campaign believed that they were the victims of Russian interference of all kinds, whether government or non-government, including hacking. There was that leak of campaign emails, which the campaign said were partly fake last Friday. So we now know that Macron is going to be willing to respond as president to any kind of Russian cyber aggression in kind. He is going to be looking at cyber defences. He is going to be looking at how France can toughen its stance towards Russia. And that, of course, means that the EU's stance towards Russia is likely to remain tough as well, with him at the helm of one of its most powerful countries.
And Remi, what happens to Marine Le Pen now and the millions of people who supported her? Do they just go away, or are they going to be a formidable force in the future?
Well, that was a key question for the second round, because she was trying to portray herself as the leader of the opposition. Had she achieved to get 40% or above in the second round, clearly she would have positioned herself as one of the major force in the coming years. Now, because of a relative failure to gather enough support, it's likely that she will not be able to ride a momentum towards the general elections, and that other parties, especially the Republican Party or maybe the Socialist Party, if they're able to just get out of their moribund state right now, will be able to be a real opposition force in the future and just try to gather support from people that might have voted for Le Pen. I just wanted to come back on the issue on the European Union. I think that the European Union is the great victor of these elections. We have to remember that that France is a country that had, you know, a large debate about where was its place inside the European Union. The Maastricht Treaty was adopted by 52% only. The European Constitution was rejected by referendum, and here was a clear question of whether or not Europe was the future for France, whether or not we should have a support to pro-European government. Right. And clearly 66% is something fairly new and clear referendum and support and plebiscite for the European Union.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.